My digestion is what I would consider perfect. I can talk to a lot of the people that do this carnivorous diet will say the same thing. The only thing that fiber does, and like I said, I've talked about this before, but fiber's main benefit when it comes to digestion is just bulk making more volume. And so all you do is you just have more frequent and larger bowel movements. But there's no real prize for that. I mean, there's no real proof that shows that has any positive bearing on gut health at all.
Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This podcast is brought to you by HitUni.com. HitUni.com are a provider of amazing online courses for high-intensity training qualifications. HitUni comes highly recommended by the best in the field, including Body by Science co-author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, and trainer and founder of Bay.com, Drew Bay. It was founded by my friend, author, and longtime personal trainer Simon Shawcross, who's also been a guest on the podcast. Simon has 15 years experience training clients and has supervised over 15,000 high-intensity training workouts. Using knowledge from experts like Skylar Tanner, Dr. James Steele, Dr. Ellington Darden, HitUni is a goldmine for learning everything to do with high-intensity training. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace. There's online support and a discussion forum where you can share ideas and ask for help. To learn more about high-intensity training and improve my own results, I started their personal trainer course. The content is amazing, the courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. I should also mention there is a DIY course. So this is the course for you if you're not necessarily a personal trainer, but you want to learn more about high-intensity training and how to implement it for maximum benefit in your own exercise regime. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's HITUNI.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, pick your course, and enter the coupon code CW10 for 10% discount. Thank you for your support. Hi guys, I am Lawrence Neal and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior, the podcast that teaches you how to optimize your health, exercise, business, and lifestyle. I've previously interviewed paleo pioneers Mark Sisson and Rob Wolf, high-intensity training experts like Dr. Doug McGuff and Drew Bay, successful entrepreneurs like David Allen and Noah Kagan, and many, many more. My next guest is Dr. Shawn Baker, whose name you will find familiar. Shawn is a board-certified orthopedic surgeon, world record holder, and 50-year-old super athlete who only eats zero carb. That means he just eats red meat and nothing else. Following Shawn's recent appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, I was keen to get him back on my show for a third time. We talk about what it was like being on Joe Rogan and the response Shawn got from the internet following that interview. And as you can imagine, the fact that he's following and advocating a zero carb diet was faced with a lot of criticism. We talk about his N=Many project, which is essentially a project where anyone can participate in many different challenges and report all of their different outcomes and metrics and data to hopefully create something meaningful which might lead to more controlled research in the future. I've been involved on that platform and looking to contribute myself in terms of a high-intensity training protocol. So I definitely encourage you to check that out, and that's on N=Many.com. We also dig into zero carb in more detail. I polled you guys for a bunch of questions. I had many of my own questions, and we talk about things like, are carbs required to create mucus, and is that important and something that is missing on the zero carb diet? Why is it that an all meat diet creates a noisy stomach, at least for myself? Is a zero carb diet environmentally sustainable? And how do we stay aware and vigilant about our own cognitive biases? I know for myself, I find the zero carb diet to be very, very attractive indeed. And it can be easy to fall into my own confirmation bias. And sometimes I have to kind of remind myself to retain a healthy skepticism for diet in general, as there's still so much we don't know. If you are interested in losing body fat and building muscle and improving your health, perhaps as part of a New Year's resolution, I'd certainly encourage you to explore this diet as an option. Again, I am not saying that it is the healthiest diet on the planet. I personally think it's effective, but there's no, I guess, rigorous scientific evidence to prove that. And I think, but that being said, I think it's worth looking into and experimenting for yourself. It's also the World Carnivore Month this January, so there'll be a ton of people doing carnivore to the max and eating lots of meat. So why not get involved? For all of the show notes and links for this episode and all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.org. Don't forget to hang around at the end of this episode for your free gift. And now I give you the one and only Dr. Shawn Baker. Shawn, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming on for a part 3.
Yeah, hey, it's always third time's a charm, right? Glad to be here, Lawrence. It's nice to see you again. Looks like you're doing well too.
Good. Well, actually, I am doing well, but not in the strength training sort of exercise department. I actually tore my calf yesterday.
What?
Yeah, I was sprinting down the basketball court. And I think I just literally came off the call with Dr. Wayne Westcott, who's a well-known strength scientist. And I think it was down to basically de-accelerating and also like too soon. But there's a couple of potential factors, such as I did a heavy leg press on the previous day. I know you're one who trains quite frequently, so that might not be an issue, but I don't know. Who knows?
Well, I mean, did you didn't tear your Achilles? You tore your like your medial gastroc or something like that? Is that what you think? Or?
Yeah, my gastrocnemius, is it? It's So
probably medial head, or maybe the plantaris. It could be the plantaris, unless you've got a good MRI that confirms it. A lot of people will tear their plantaris tendon, which is a pretty small tendon that tears pretty easily. But that's one of the reasons I'm constantly jumping and training this stuff, so I'm used to that, so that I don't tear stuff. So anyway, interesting.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I should be. I mean, it's not so bad today, and I think in a week or two I'll be okay. But no, I wanted to. Recently you appeared on Joe Rogan, which was amazing, and really happy to see you on that platform and being able to communicate your message to his audience. Tell us about what that's been. Did Joe tell you the exposure that you're likely to get in terms of like the downloads they get to their show or the viewers?
Well, I mean, I've watched a few Joe's episodes. I think Joe's got some really interesting people on it. I know he's got a pretty big audience and it continues to grow. And so, sure, I mean, I've experienced quite an influx in people communicating with me, and a lot of just interesting sort of opportunities are coming up now, and so it's pretty fun, and I kind of knew that going into it, but at the same time, Joe's a nice guy, he's very relaxed, really. I mean, we talked a lot before the show. He's just a really down to earth guy, so it's very easy to talk to him. I would have liked to, talk. Added more things in there, but again, he's an interview and he understands his audience and he wants to push things along like he wants to, and so, but yeah, I mean, I was prepared for some of it. It's some of the other stuff that I've been getting that's sort of surprising to me. Some of the interesting stuff, which has been pleasantly surprising. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with that other stuff.
Have you had to deal with much negative comments? I saw a lot of trolling on YouTube. That's not a surprise. How are you dealing with the negativity?
I just didn't read most of them. I mean, I understand, people, they're making fun of my voice and how I look and saying I'm on drugs and, blah, and I'm an idiot and, that's fine. I mean, there's people that are, any issue that's polarizing, you're going to generate some hatred from one side or the other. Doesn't matter. And that stuff doesn't bother. It's like sticks and stones, I mean, big deal. Who cares? I mean, I'm fully prepared for that. And this is one way that I've found that works well for me and lots of other people. And I think other people should be free to explore that. And so, the fact that other people don't like it is no big deal. That's, there's almost no issues on the world where, you could talk about Star Wars, who's the best figure in Star Wars, and you'd bring on a bunch of hatred. That's just the way the world works these days, especially with social media.
Yeah. Let's, Shawn, we're going to have to probably go audio only because I lost you there for a second and I don't want to lose you again. So do you mind if we just go audio as much as I like to do video?
I do not mind at all. Let me just
for bandwidth reasons.
Yeah, let me switch to me. Let me see. Are we audio only now? I think. How's that sound?
I can still see your video. Oh, there you go. That's good. That's good.
Okay. Good. Well,
do you mind just repeating what you said about, so you literally, just as you started saying sticks and stones, it cut out. So do you mind just repeating that piece and we can go from there?
Yeah, I'll see if I can pick it up. Yeah, I mean, basically it's, but it's just a bunch of words, people talking. I think any position you take these days, whether it be diet, politics, religion, who's your favorite what's the best Star Wars movie? I mean, it doesn't matter. You're going to get people that are vehemently opposed to that, and they'll generate hatred, and they'll call you all kinds of names and stuff like that. So, I mean, I've been punched in the face playing rugby, boxing. I mean, this little, I've had people dying in front of me as a surgeon. I mean, this little name calling stuff is like, I could care less. I mean, it doesn't bother me at all. And if anything, those guys, all they're doing is generating more interest in me by hating on me. So if you want to do that, that's fine. I'll get more publicity and we'll get this message out. And I think, like I said, all I want to do is let's figure out what makes people healthier. I mean, that's what my goal is. And even if it's an unpopular way that it happens. I mean, it just is what it is. I wish the world you could eat gummy bears and chocolate cake and be happy and healthy, and animals live forever and so on and so forth. But that's just not the way the world works. And so you have to, at some point, deal with, what actually works. So that's what I'm trying to get the message out about.
I don't want to dwell on this too much because it's not that important. But someone's, and just for the record, I think you have a very cool voice. But someone did say something like, your voice being something down to acid reflux or something like that. I'm gonna guess that you've had this particular unique voice for most of your life. Like, has that changed at all since going zero carb?
Not that I can tell you. I mean, I think my voice has been the same way for 20 or 30 years. I've done a lot of yelling over the years and screaming, lifting, and maybe yelling at my kids and stuff like that. But that's my voice. Some people say it sounded like Bill Clinton a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily want to be associated with Bill Clinton, but anyway, that's my voice. It is what it is, and it hasn't changed from being on a diet.
Okay, cool. So let's get into some of these zero carb related questions. Get through some of these. So, question I had actually is I was listening to a podcast recently and, they were talking about the downsides of a low carbohydrate diet. And one of those was the claim that, we need carbs to create mucus and to help form the lining in the stomach or the gut, I think. And so for overall gut health. And obviously if you're eating just protein or steak in your case, how are we sure that we're going to tick those boxes, or how do you think about that? What's your view on stuff like that?
Yeah, so I think if you look at why does our body produce mucus in general, and I think Mike Eads points this out, Dr. Mike Eads a while ago. If you have mucus in your lungs, it's not a particularly good thing, right? I mean, and the reason your body puts down mucus is it's a response to an irritation. So if you're a smoker or you're exposed to chemicals or you got a virus, your lungs will respond by secreting mucus to protect the lining of the lungs, right, from further insult. And so when we have mucus in our lungs, it makes our lungs not function as well. We have to cough the stuff up. We're trying to get rid of it. But the fact that we get it in our intestines, we somehow think that's good for a reason. And the same thing happens. I mean, your body produces mucus to coat and protect those surfaces from an irritant, right? And so mucus in your colon is the same as mucus in your lungs largely. I mean, it's a defense mechanism. And so the question is, well, what are we defending ourselves from? Well, I will say, and I think there's a lot of people that have looked at this and now and people that have experienced it, is it's that lots of fiber running through our system is an irritant to our intestines. And that's why we're seeing so much irritable bowel disease and irritable bowel syndrome now, because we've got this, we've got a number of things going on. but I think that's one of them. So I think the mucus response in the first place is just to an irritation. We've got irritated bowels from running a bunch of fiber we can't really digest, and it's irritating. Some people will now say that we need the mucus to feed particular bacteria that help us to digest that fiber in the first place. Well, I think that's really circular logic. And I will tell you from my experience and the experience of now thousands of people that I've either directly interacted with and studied, is that when they get rid of fiber in their diet, their digestion is just so much better. They feel better. And so I think the whole mucus argument is just a sort of, how do we justify eating a bunch of fiber or a bunch of cereal? And there's, companies that make a lot of money selling you cereal, and so they want to say, well, you need mucus. But I would contend that it's probably not necessary, at least, to have tons of mucus in your colon.
Interesting. Yeah, because we're taught the opposite of that, We're taught for years through schooling and I guess the media that we require fiber for efficient and effective digestion. But you're saying that it's actually kind of the opposite.
Well, I mean, again, my digestion is what I would consider perfect. I can talk to a lot of the people that do this carnivorous diet that will say the same thing. The only thing that fiber does, and like I said, I've talked about this before, but fiber's main benefit when it comes to digestion is just making more volume. And so all you do is you just have more frequent and larger bowel movements. But there's no real prize for that. I mean, there's no real proof that shows that has any positive bearing on gut health at all. I mean, it's all just, some epidemiologic stuff, which, again, much of the way we've, decided what's healthy is through this really bad epidemiology and a lot of associational studies. And when you actually look at people and you critically look at their objective clinical signs of health, I don't think that's bearing out. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to sort of, that's why I'm a big proponent of this N equals one stuff and now N equals many, is that we have to really, really critically look at what helps and what doesn't. And I don't think a high fiber diet, in all cases helps. I think in some cases it may be more beneficial than an all junk food diet. And so if you're eating a bunch of sugar and processed stuff, then fiber probably limits the exposure of that stuff. We know that fiber may impede some of the blood sugar uptake, and so that may have a beneficial effect. But when you're not eating blood sugar, when you're not eating glucose like I'm doing, then it has minimal impact. So I think it's, at best, fiber is conditionally beneficial, but to say it's absolutely beneficial and necessary, I would strongly argue against that.
It just shows how important context is for stuff like this, and no, it's fascinating. You've spoken before about obviously you get a lot of people say, oh, you'll be nutrient deficient in X, Y, and Z, and you've talked about, well, actually, again, referring back to context, there isn't this huge influx of carbohydrates, so you don't actually need to produce as much vitamin C or fill in the blank. However, is there any harm if someone does want to supplement a zero carb diet with a vitamin supplement or some kind of supplement?
Probably not, at least in the short term, I don't think so. There's some people out there, and again, there are some people who have been doing this for longer than I have, and so they've got some pretty good insight as well. And, they will contend that if you continually supplement things, then your body will sort of down-regulate our ability to not need those things as much. So it's kind of like, I think our bodies are very adaptable. And, if you, let's say you don't actually need a bunch of vitamin C, but you keep giving it extra anyway, then there's some point that maybe over time that'll be a problem. But I think in what I found for people, the biggest issue with supplementation for people to transition over a carnivore diet is, I think that it may have some efficacy in the beginning, as some people come to this situation already nutrient depleted. And there's also some people, and I like to use gastric bypass patients as a very good example. Those people, just by the fact that they've had part of their stomach removed, will, they cannot absorb nutrients like someone else can. And so those people may have to continue to supplement. But I think long term, if you're going to do this diet for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, probably most people that you run into will not supplement. There's still a few people that may use some vitamin D if they live in the great northern climates. And again, I think that's also, again, certain people that live in northern climates, will tend to want to supplement vitamin D. Just because they don't have as much sunlight exposure. And again, I don't think that's a necessary bad thing, but I don't know for sure if that ultimately makes a difference in your health. You may be able to raise your blood levels of vitamin D, but again, I don't know that we understand for sure what is that truly normal based on what diet we're on. There were some studies from even as far back as 1890 looking at different animals on low carb diets versus high carb diets, and they saw that their vitamin requirements, as evidenced by developing diseases, were different. So if you were on a low carb diet, both your blood levels of a vitamin and your threshold for getting disease were different than if you were on a high carb diet. If you're on a high carb diet, you needed higher levels of vitamins in your blood. If you're on a low carb diet, you needed lower levels of vitamins in your blood to avoid disease. So that very well could be going on as well. We just don't know that because of all of our reference indices for what nutrients and what vitamins we need are based on high carb population. So I just don't think we know. So, you may, to hedge your bets and be safe, maybe adding some extra supplements like vitamin D may be a benefit, but to say with any certainty that's true, I just don't know, and I'm open-minded about it.
So I recorded a podcast with someone recently, and they're a huge fan of what you're doing, and they will do a 3-day fast. That person will do a 3-day fast once a week, and they will go into a high intensity strength training based workout fasted, and then fast for 48 hours after the workout, and then have a massive meal of meat, pretty much, and then it's one meal a day after that, if that makes sense. I just wondered, do you think there's any, because I said to him, do you think that, based on some of the research coming out of Stuart Phillips' lab with regard to protein intake, that, the window that you're creating there post-workout is just too big? What do you think about that? Do you think that that's potentially suboptimal, or do you think it really doesn't matter?
I think, 3 days without food for me would be suboptimal. I mean, I think that I've gone, the other day I went about 30 hours, fat nut. I will say without eating. It wasn't fasting because I wasn't hungry because I ate such a damn big meal of, I had 6 pounds in one setting, which is a lot of meat. So I just wasn't hungry for about 30 hours. And I was just out of town. I went to one of these Brazilian restaurants and I just pigged out basically. So I put down about 6 pounds. And so, but I think that, again, this comes back to what I believe is one of the reasons we have a hunger signal in the first place, and if my sort of hypothesis is that humans are optimally suited eating basically just mostly meat or, all meat diet, that once you're getting that nutrition, then the next time you're actually hungry, your body's just saying, hey man, I need some more structural materials to build whatever I'm going to build, to maintain whatever I'm going to maintain. And then of course for some energy requirements that, you get from meat, which would be in the context of fat, and a little bit of protein from any gluconeogenesis that might happen. So I'm not a proponent of long fasting. I also, like I said, I think infrequent meal frequency is a good idea. I think if you can get away with 1-2 meals a day, that's probably good for a lot of people. And I think most people that long-term do a carnivorous diet generally end up in that pattern anyway. And I think it's a very natural way to do it. I don't think humans ever intentionally starved. I think there may have been times, depending upon time of year, location, and climate stuff, that we did do that. And one of the problems is they look at hunter-gatherers, today or in the last 100 years, and we notice that sometimes they were unsuccessful hunting, and so they try to extrapolate that back to our evolutionary times. And I don't know that that's true. I think there was a period of time when there was a ton of big grazing animals, and we were pretty good hunters. At some point we became very efficient at killing those things. And so I think if you're living in Ice Age Europe, or you're living in the grasslands surrounding that area, and there's a bunch of herds of these, mastodons and mammoths and woolly rhinoceros and, the Irish elk and all these animals that were, in herds of hundreds of thousands, and you're a very good hunter, as humans figure this stuff out, then you probably didn't have to starve that often. And so I think that we probably ate fairly regularly. Again, there's no way to know this for sure. So I don't know that, I think you just have to see what works best for you. That may be a way to lose some body fat but it may come at the cost of maybe you're not optimizing how much muscle you can maintain or keep at the same time. And I think there's a difference between losing weight and losing body fat and optimizing strength and muscle. I think those things can go together, but I don't think they always do. And I think a 3 or 4 day fast for me would be too long. But again, I'm open-minded enough, and like I said, some people might be able to make that work.
One of my listeners has I think experimented with zero carb for a prolonged period of time. I think he might now be mixing it up a little bit, but he mentioned to me that if he has a large meal of meat at say 6 p.m. and then plans to go to bed for 9:30, he'll struggle to go to sleep with a lot having eaten that large meal quite a bit before. And I think he's using some apps or devices to track sleep quality. Have you had any feedback like this before? Have you got any advice for that person?
Yeah, I've seen and certainly experienced it myself that sometimes I think your sleep requirement decreases a little bit on even a ketogenic diet, but on a zero carb diet. I think for me, 5.5 to 6 hours right now is something that I often will get, sometimes a little bit longer, but but at the same time, I don't feel tired when I'm up. Sometimes I'll wake up earlier than I used to. I mean, I'll basically wake up at around 5 o'clock every morning. But I'll end up going to bed around 10 typically. So that's closer to 7 hours for me. But I've heard people say 5.5 to 6 hours is not uncommon. And one of the things I have found for me is, depending on how much I eat and how close I eat to bedtime. And I think, one of the reasons we sleep is to restore, and to help build, synthesize things that will, repairing stuff while we're sleeping. And so I think when you have such a huge amount of available protein floating around, that repair process probably takes a little less time than if you didn't have that. So I find that I try to eat during the daylight hours, and I think that's made a little bit of difference for me. If I do eat a big meal at say 8 p.m., which I don't as much anymore, my sleep not always but often will be a little shorter. And so I think there's something that ties in the amount of sleep you have and what your state of repair is and what kind of repairs you need to do. Because I think we repair ourselves during sleep. If there's less repairs that need to be done, then you probably can get by with a little less sleep. And, I think there's some circadian biology going on. I think we're designed to probably, eat during the daylight hours. I think Bill Gakos talks a lot about this sort of stuff, but I think there's something to it. I think it's not I also think that if you're starving and it's nighttime, you should still eat though. So I think you have to kind of figure out which is more important of the two. And I think obeying your appetite is probably more important. But yeah, I think there is something to that, Lawrence.
What about struggling to fall asleep? So would you just recommend they stay up later? If that requires less sleep, then that might make sense.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into getting into sleep. I think temperature of your room is important. I think, a dark environment is important. So a cool, dark environment is important. I think what kind of stimulation you had, in the preceding hours are important. So if you're, going crazy on Twitter, or you've worked out, or you've had a whatever very stimulating event, then that becomes harder to sleep. I think so. One of the things I would do sometimes is I would just take a cold shower. I know you started doing this a little bit, but maybe an hour before I go to bed, and that drops my body, helps to drop my body temperature, and it just kind of puts me in this sleepy state. So I think there's some things you can do that are outside of diet that help with sleep.
I find that after a big meal of meat, which I'm not, I'm a big fan of this. Well, a big fan, and I'm interested, but I remain skeptical because I think it's, as you said, it's healthy to kind of retain a healthy skepticism, and we'll go into that in a bit later. But I find that after a big meal of meat, I have a very noisy stomach afterwards, and it's not uncomfortable or painful in any way. It's just an observation I've noticed. It's almost like I can hear all of the processes in my body. Have you had that type of feedback from the people who are participating in this? That they have, I guess, a noisier stomach after a meal?
Well, I think, and that's just your meal generally, and meat included, will generally spend about 3 to 4 hours in your stomach. That's generally the gastric emptying time. And so, yeah, I mean, your stomach, your actual stomach is basically, moving, has to mechanically mix the stuff. There's hydrochloric acid secreting a few enzymes in there. And so that's the initial part of digestion. And probably, if you'll notice, by about 3 to 4 hours, there'll be no more of that. And then the rest of digestion is completely silent. So once it gets into the intestines, it's pretty silent, and there's nothing. Probably notice a huge diminished decrease in the amount of gas and bloating in the lower intestines. And so, but yeah, that's completely normal. I mean, that's one of the hallmarks of that sort of diet, is you have a sort of a short, period where you're digesting, and then a long, what we call interdigestive period, where there's not much going on. Everything else is just kind of smooth sailing after that. But yeah, that's not unusual. And I've heard that before, and I've experienced that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're, as you've said before, your stool is much smaller because so much more of the meat is absorbed in the body, and it's just you hear about what you just said just there about the process in the stomach, and it's just it seems to be so much evidence, and it seems to be so clear to me that this is an optimal way to eat, and I'm making quite a statement by saying that. I just want to know why is it that that you're the one who's really kind of taking this movement to the next level? I know there's been a movement on the Facebook group that you mentioned before for a long, long time. I know people have been doing this for decades, but why like the people like the Anderson family been doing this for decades, and yet it's only really now that it's becoming kind of more well known? Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. I think that, this, the science of ketogenic diets and stuff has got people out there that are more open to this. So we've got a little more science behind that, so we're starting to discover that a lot of things we took for basically dogma are turning out not to be true. So I think there's, in general, a healthy skepticism about nutrition in general. I mean, there's so many people that are sick and that are just not getting healthy that people are kind of frustrated with the standard advice that's coming out there. So I think there's a lot more people that are open to saying, I just don't believe you anymore. And they want to experiment for themselves. I think that, obviously with the explosion of social media in the last decade, that we have just more people that are able just to communicate and share their experiences. And that's one of the things that I've kind of really discovered, that this is a huge tool to really change the world. There's a lot of just crap about social media. So there's a lot of just silly, destructive behavior and pettiness and stuff that goes on in social media. But I think at the same time, you can do a lot through that. And I think, again, for whatever reason, I try to downplay this, but I think some people, just because somebody's an MD, they have this sort of, you get some afforded some special status in the terms of what you know and what you can say. And like I said, I tell people there are plenty of smart people out there about nutrition that are not PhDs or not MDs, and they're just as smart. But just because I have a few initials behind my name doesn't necessarily mean anything. Now, I can't change the fact that I have that. And the other thing is, with me in particular, I think some of the athletic stuff I've been able to do, it's very in your face. I mean, it's basically, well, you say I can't do that. Well, obviously I'm doing it. And then, I've also come to understand that, part of this, there's a bit of an entertainment aspect to this. People want entertainment. We learned that in our presidential election here, that, whoever can entertain the people the most gets the most attention. And so part of that is, some of what I do is I try to be entertaining and a little bit outrageous at times. But at the same point, I'm trying to drive home a point, and I just want people to listen. And if you can get their attention, some people will be turned off by that, but enough people will, they'll just take a second look. And the people that, I had, people on the, that even on Joe Rogan's show, there's people that say, man, I saw a carnivore doctor and I thought this was going to be awful and I would hate it. I'd be pissed about it. And then they actually listened because it drawed in there, it captured their attention. And once they listened to what I had to say and started to really sort of think about things, it just changes people. So I think that's part of it. The Andersons are great people. I know they went out, they did an interview and they got attacked by vegans and vegetarians because they were giving their kids meat and stuff like that. The time wasn't there yet. So I think, and I'm certainly getting attacked. There's a lot of personal attacks on me, and that's, like I said, I just don't. I don't worry about that stuff. I'm not doing that. Like I said, I'm getting messages every day now from people that are saying they're very inspired and they're very happy and they're proud, and at the same time, so it's kind of nuts. You get out there and you're making a difference in people's lives, and I think that's what counts. So I think I think we're going to see in 2018 that this is going to be a big thing. I think we're going to see some mainstream experimentation. I think ultimately what's going to happen is a lot of those people that do it are going to notice dramatic improvements in their health. And I think it's going to really, it's so polarizing. It's so different from what we're used to. It's going to really open people's eyes up and will really change the way nutrition is done, quite honestly.
Yeah, I almost want to not agree because I don't want to seem like I'm following some fad, which sounds ridiculous, but it's just, it appears to be very, very beneficial. And I haven't even converted fully. You know me, I still have my decorations on occasion, Shawn, and potatoes and things like that.
And I'll just say, Lawrence, I don't think there's necessarily, you have to be 100% meat. I think that, there's people that probably will greatly improve their lives, like Ted Naiman does. I think, if you eat a lot of it, and then you may, if you tolerate some berries here and there and a few vegetables or whatever, that's probably also very good for many people. But there are just a number of people that find that, for whatever reason, certain foods mess them up. And sometimes those are vegetables. And so I just think we have to be very objective about it and not give any particular food special protected status because our mother told us it was good. And we've got some really poor epidemiology, and there's certainly some ethical things, and there's some financial things, and all those things. So I think we just have to say, get down and be very objective about it, and say, hey, if broccoli messes my guts up and makes me feel good, then I'm not going to eat broccoli. I don't care what somebody thinks is in it.
So before we started recording, I was complimenting you on your suntan, sort of, and you mentioned to me that one of the things that is kind of the people in the zero carb community are seeing is this ability to tolerate greater sun exposure. I think that's right. How, that kind of leads me to ask you, how do you make sure that you remain skeptical and kind of like view things through like the scientific lens and not get carried away with confirmation bias? Because it's so easy to get influenced by that, that bias. How do you stay true to yourself in that sense when you're looking at, the literature and looking at the way your health's changing and things like that?
Yeah, I think, honestly, Lawrence, I think it's impossible to avoid that to some degree. Certainly I read literature and look at observations through a different lens than I used to. I'm looking at things that, my thought is maybe humans are best suited as carnivores. And so anything I read, I'm going to view that through that lens. And I think it's impossible to get away from that, right? So I think, what you have to do and what I'm trying to do is collect data. And just, even though, we're doing it over the internet, it's done for free and it's not ideal. But like I said, I'm just trying to get more and more information to try to do this. And I think that, hopefully with time we'll have, bigger and bigger groups that study. We've got World Carnivore Month coming up in January. We'll hopefully get a whole bunch more data then. And I think that, I am not opposed to experimenting, and see what works. And I think there's ways that I like to get feedback on those things. Certainly I'm aware of a whole body of evidence that would point to things that would disagree with me, and I'm certainly willing to look at those things. But I think, again, when I read the nutritional literature in general, I just realize how much we don't know overall, and I realize how easy it is to interpret it one way or the other. And so I just think it's really hard. I think it's a really hard job to try to read the 500,000 studies that are out there on diet and try to come up with a definite answer to that. And so like I said, whatever I think in my brain is going on, what ultimately happens is I need to look at what's going on physically with me and be, as objective as I can. Like I said, is there bias? Sure, absolutely. I'm biased, and I think everybody is. But I think, and that's what I try to tell people: don't listen to me. Don't take my word for it. Don't listen to any other gurus out there. Don't read a couple research papers and think that's the end of it. Really critically look at your health. Really critically look at your performance, and apply things objectively and see what actually works and what doesn't. But you have to give it some time. You can't just say, I eat meat for one day and I got an upset stomach and then dismiss it. There's people that will do that. So I think it's, but the short answer is it's probably impossible not to have some confirmation bias. I don't care who you are.
I've not looked at it like that before. Do you still spend a fair amount of time reading that the evidence against a zero carb diet?
Yeah, I'm constantly reminded of it by, generally a lot of vegans and stuff like that. And some of the studies I'll read, but then, a lot of them I'll just dismiss out of hand if they're, a lot of the epidemiology studies, even though I reference some of them, and I just do that just to point out that there's two sides to every story. But most of what I see is epidemiology, and most of when I look at that stuff, I'm just like, unless the odds ratio or the hazard ratio is astronomically high, it's almost completely worthless to read. It really is. And so, certainly I'm aware, vegetarians and vegans are doing well. There's muscular guys that do that, and I don't discount that you can't do that. So, yeah, I'm aware of it. I think what we're seeing is a lot of the data that goes against this is becoming historical, and there's most of the new stuff is more supportive. And so as the newer research comes out, we're seeing more and more things that would sort of point to, saturated fat is not harmful, cholesterol is kind of meaningless. And so, again, the more research is coming out in recent times over the last decade and the last few years sort of supports this stuff. But certainly there's people that will always bring up the Seventh-day Adventist study and all these sort of vegan talking points, but that there's no new research. The Pure study that just came out of Europe, again, all the new stuff seems to be pointing the other way. So I haven't seen a lot of great new studies out there that sort of dissuade me so far.
So you mentioned about the N equals many experiment. You've got the N equals many website, nequalsmany.com, where you've got everyone or a lot of people participating in various protocols, myself included. I did the 100 push-up challenge with a cold shower. I didn't actually do it every day. I think I deviated 3 or 4 days in a month. But it was interesting. It wasn't very fun. The cold showers were quite uncomfortable, but I still do them now because they certainly do wake you up in the morning. And I've found for me there's been a significant improvement in mood, just for myself. I'd be absolutely fascinated, Shawn, to hear about some of the findings from the work you've done so far. I know some people listening to this will think, well, that's not, it's observational, it's sort of self-reporting, it's not very scientific, but it's what we have to work with at the moment, isn't it? So can you tell us kind of what your findings have been and what your sort of discoveries are at this point?
Yeah, so a couple, and you're absolutely right, Lawrence. There are a number of criticisms I would make of this study. If I was and that's just what we're limited to for now. But like I said, this is going to evolve. One of the issues, because the only data that we've actually started to tabulate now is from that 90-day Carnivore study, and Matt Mayer, bless his heart, is working his butt off trying to get this data sorted. There's a ton. We generate hundreds and hundreds of thousands of data points from this, so he's figuring out algorithms and trying to get guys to help him to do that. So we're still very preliminary on what data we're coming out. One of the things we discovered early on is that, it's a pain in the butt for people to track all this data. And so a lot of people just stopped doing it because they didn't want it was too much of a hassle for them. So we had to make it easier and easier. So we limited, how much detail we wanted people to track, and really just track what we really want to track, and then did that stuff. So, but what we found from the people that completed 90 days of carnivory, and again, this is also subjective, self-reported data that, and we didn't differentiate yet. We still have to sort this through, but just all comers, of the people that completed that, all of the patients, or not all the patients, all the participants, with very rare exceptions, reported all of their subjective markers. And we looked at things like general health, mood, exercise capacity, sexual function, gastrointestinal function, skin health, and a couple others. Every single one of them reported it got better, it either got much better or it didn't change. And there were just one or two that said things got a little worse. And, there were some people that were already zero carb or carnivorous going into this, and maybe the ones that didn't change like me. Nothing changed for me because I was already there. So we haven't sorted that out. But generally, it was a very positive experience for those people that completed 90 days. Now, we're still getting lab data. I've seen just, basically snippets of anecdotes from lab data, and that's also been generally very positive. Again, I'm still waiting for this to get as much as we can analyzed. So that has been, the preliminary data. We'll see what shows up in the long term. And again, it's not randomized. There's no control group. There's confirmation bias on people that did it. There's all kinds of arguments and holes you can poke in this, and that's true and that's fine. But given the limitations we had going into it, no one got scurvy, no one died, no one got sick. So, just, and that was our goal at the beginning. We said, what's going to be a win? Well, see how many people will complete the study and make sure no one gets sick or dies. And none of that happened. So, if you listen to the vegan propaganda, everybody would get horrible diabetes and, all their blood markers would get bad and everybody gets sick and miserable. And that's just not what we found. And so I think, and that's consistent with what I've been reading for years online about this stuff. So we're just showing that. And I think once we do this World Carnivore Challenge in January, and I think with the exposure I've gotten on, Joe Rogan's show and some of these other shows, that we're going to have a whole bunch of participants. We're just going to get more data. And then hopefully, we'll make it easy enough for most people where a lot of people will stay into it. It's only 30 days. We're making it a little more relaxed. We're letting people eat eggs and dairy and drink their coffee and have a glass of wine. With the 90-day one, it was very strict. So we kind of relaxed things a little bit. We're still eliminating plants, except for maybe a little bit of spices and stuff like that. But so generally, I think we'll have a pretty high compliance rate and hopefully get even more data. Maybe we'll go to where we get, maybe even a few thousand people that will participate. So that would be,
wow.
That'll be just interesting. And then, like I said, hopefully this will stimulate maybe a more formal study. Certainly if I was involved, I'd certainly be happy to be involved in that. I know there's some people that talked about early on, depending on how things go, that maybe we can get some NIH funding, to do something like this. So that would be interesting. And again, we've got all these other studies going on, which are also very interesting: push-ups, cold showers, meditation. We've got a squat thing, and I know you've got something waiting for us in the wings.
I do.
We'll do a little hit. We'll do a hit program, and just see. I think it's, if anything, what it does is when people think they're part of a study, they're more likely to do it. And if anything else, it's just a motivation. And a lot of people generally want to contribute to the knowledge base. And I think this is a great way to do it.
Yeah, and you're obviously waiting on me to send you my high intensity training protocol. And apologies for the delay.
That's okay, Lawrence. I understand.
I have actually done the videos recently, and I've even been in touch with Dr. James Fisher, who's one of the kind of leading exercise researchers, to get his take on how I could make it have high compliance and make it as simple as possible, but also make sure I'm, we're measuring the right things. So yeah, I've got that information. I just need to send it over to you. So yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm excited. I'll be happy to. We'll push it out there and hopefully get a bunch of people that will try it out.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about sustainability. My girlfriend is vegetarian, so you can only imagine the conflict in my household. And she's not that surprised now because I've been eating, massive portions of meat since we've, for the last sort of 6 months or so. But, there is obviously this debate around sustainability. Can you talk to me about that and what your research has shown in terms of, how sustainable is this way of eating for most people?
Are you talking about just a person complying with it long term?
No, sorry, basically? I meant from an ethical point of view.
You mean like environmental and stuff like that?
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So and again, I am by no means a cattle rancher. I'm not an agronomist. I'm not a climate researcher. And I think there's a lot of controversy about this stuff. I think when we talk about how we're going to feed the world, and again, I don't necessarily think that the whole world is going to go carnivore. I mean, I just don't think. Even if 1% did, I would be surprised. But I think that can we improve our environmental impact with agriculture? Well, if you look at the United States in particular, okay, and I know a lot of people will have problems with some of the things we do, but in general, the efficiency that the United States produces, protein, via cattle ranching, and cattle production, is orders of magnitude above much of where the world is. Especially if you look at Southeast Asia, India, Africa, the developing nations are where the problems are at. This is where the climate problems are at. This is where all the vast methane production issues are. But if we look at the United States, our footprint is about 1/50th of what we're seeing in other parts of the world. Now, the UK is obviously a little different example, and I think you have to look at that impact. We also look at, again, the greenhouse gases, the primary one being methane and carbon dioxide are the two major issues. Carbon dioxide, the carbon cycle depends upon animal agriculture to redeposit carbon in the soil. I think there's a lot of good data on that showing that if we were to allow animals to graze in the lands that are grazable, and most of our land is not farmable. There's only a certain amount of land that's arable, about 4% of the land in the world, and about 20% of the land is grazable. So we have much greater opportunity for grazing than we do continue to grow corn and soybeans and wheat and things like that. And so we also know that cows, if they're managed properly, and rotated, and they do the popular pasture management, like guys like Alan Saver and some of these other guys talk about, that would have a net positive effect on carbon. Okay, and there's some people that have even looked at that if you could increase, that efficiency by 10% with the current cattle population, it would bring our carbon dioxide levels back down to what it was 100 years ago, just by putting the cows in there. And so, if we look at historically throughout, the last 200,000 years, we've had huge populations of roaming animals across North America. You had huge populations of buffalo that even exceed the current cattle population, and we did fine. We had throughout Europe, we had the same thing, all these ranging animals. So the earth was fine. And so our natural sources of methane are the ocean puts out quite a bit, wetlands put out quite a bit, termites put out quite a bit, and then animals put out quite a bit. And that's what we've lived with for hundreds of thousands of years, and our earth was fine. Now, we've added to that even more significantly through, production of electricity, industries, mining, things like that. So those are the newer things that the world hasn't experienced. And so we really have to look at that stuff as well, I think, more importantly. So the answer is this: not the whole world goes vegan and we get rid of cows, because that's not consistent with history. I mean, that's humans, and the planet has always had huge numbers of these ruminant animals, and they have a net positive effect on the environment. So that's kind of an overall broad picture. There's different specific things that you can talk about, which I think are still controversial. The ethical stuff. Again, and I talked a little bit about some Joe Rogan show that I think that. Most cattle ranchers, and I've talked to them directly, I mean, they really, really, truly care for their animals. They're out there in the snow and the rain. They're giving their animals medicine. They're treating them. They're taking them inside. They're hand feeding these animals. I mean, they're in there doing the best they can to take care of their animals. And there probably are a few bad apples out there that are doing things, and those people just need to be addressed and dealt with appropriately. But I think the vast majority of people that do this for a living, and we don't give them enough thanks. I mean, they're out there doing a hard job and making sure that we can all eat. So I think that, again, I think cows particularly have it probably reasonably well compared to other animals. I think there's probably more work to be done with say, poultry like chickens and pigs and stuff like that. But I think we all have the responsibility to continue to improve upon that, and and not leave it up to vegetarians to say, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's so much benefit from a health standpoint that these animals give us by their sacrifice.
Just to clarify, so is one of the reasons the issue regarding the kind of methane production, are you saying that's kind of driven by the fact that most of them are grain fed in the US, for example, and then they're looking at that, and then if you were to obviously change the diet and make sure they were pastured, would that then change that? Is that not true?
No, so actually it's not true. So unfortunately, the grass-fed animals produce more methane than grain-fed animals.
Oh.
It just has to do with the quality of the food. So it's just less efficient. So for them to eat forage, they require more bacterial activity to process that, and so they put out more methane. And so it's interesting. In Australia, they discovered a red algae that if they give to the animals, it almost completely 90% gets rid of all their methane. So that's something that might be able to be commercially produced long term. Right now, it's difficult because they have to hand gather that stuff. But they found if they give that to the cattle, so maybe they can figure out what that compound is and mass produce it, in a cheap fashion, and just feed that in the cattle feed, and then they can all eat grass fed, and then there's minimal methane impact. But methane has been part of the environment from cattle or buffalo or mastodons or mammoths for hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. So I don't think the issue with cattle producing methane is the main target here. It's what the earth has dealt with forever. And so, but yeah, unfortunately, and that's what's confusing. Grain-fed animals produce less methane than grass-fed animals. And I know we all like to think that grass-fed is the best of everything, but there are negatives to that. And in fact, a grain-fed animal, if you just want to look at from an ethical standpoint, it takes you 4 cows to put out the same amount of meat grain-fed as it takes you to put out 5. It takes you 5 cows of grass-fed to put out the same amount of meat as a grain-fed cow. When we look at number of animals that have to be sacrificed, so it's confusing. It really is, and I think that we can't make it all black and white.
What do you say to those that say we shouldn't kill animals? It's unethical. We have all these alternative food sources. We should leave the animals alone. What do you say to comments like that?
Well, I mean, it's again, I think that it's our biology sort of has shown that that's what we've done ever since we've sort of evolved as a species. You can go back to probably 4 million years ago when we started, 3 million years ago when we started hunting as Homo habilis, and scavenging probably before that as Australopithecus. So I mean, that's just part of our DNA. It's part of our biology. I think any animal in the wild is, it's like telling lions don't eat zebras anymore. I mean, it's just not a healthy thing long term. Now, can you make synthetic things that can kind of simulate that? I think that, we've already gone to a grain-based and carbohydrate and mostly plant-based diet as it is, and our health, for the last 10,000 years has gotten worse, since before we were hunting and stuff like that. I think this is just another step in the de-evolution of man. I mean, we're just going to get sicker and sicker when we do that. And so I just don't think that's a good idea. I think the better answer is to figure out how to pasture these animals correctly, figure out the best ways to make it as ethical as possible, and live, and live that way. And so, there's too many, there's just 100% plant-based diets for vast majority of the population will result in a lot of suffering and disease, and for a lot of people, I mean, there's, not everybody in the world can afford to get algae from, spirulina and algae and all these different supplements, and, get beans and rice and all these different, 25 different types of organic vegetables to make an adequate diet. Most people in the world aren't in that situation. They need to have animal products in there to get complete nutrition. And so it's only Western privilege and very select people that can even attempt, a vegan diet. And so it's just, again, it's not sustainable for the world. regardless, and I don't fault people for wanting to do that and trying it. And if their ethics lead them there, that's fine. But, it stops at your diet stops at the end of your fork. You shouldn't be picking at other people's plates. Let them eat what they need to eat.
Have you managed to convert many vegetarians?
Have I? It's interesting. I am getting a few, quite honestly. There are people that tell me, certainly in the zero carb community, there are a ton of them, right? There are lots of former vegans and vegetarians that just got really sick on that, and they just found that going by all meat, they radically improved their health. And so I am getting I'm getting direct messages about once or twice a week. I'll get somebody who is either a long-term vegan or vegetarian that's coming up to me and saying, yeah, I've got people who told me that, you can follow my Twitter feed. They'll say it's the first time I've had meat in 18 years and I feel wonderful. I have a lady that hadn't eaten red meat in 20 years and now she's totally on board, loving it. Super, her health is getting better. And so, yeah, I definitely have.
Interesting. I'm asking you this because I'm trying to figure out how to convert my girlfriend without really upsetting her. Well, obviously she's not going to be converted if she's upset.
Yeah, I'll tell you, my girlfriend when I met her, she was pretty much a vegetarian.
I remember you saying,
but had really bad digestive issues. Everything hurt her stomach. She was desperately trying to figure out what she could eliminate from her diet, and now she's about a 90% carnivore. She still eats a little bit of fruit and vegetables, but every meal is, some sort of meat. And so she's the happiest she's been in, 20 years. So which is nice.
Do you know what we were going to do is we were going to switch places, which obviously I wouldn't be happy doing, but if it means that she'll eat meat and experience what that's like for a month, then I'm kind of willing. So I was going to be a vegetarian pretty much for an entire month, just so that she would do this. Do you think that could be a good strategy and that she'll then experience how it feels and the benefits?
Well, I think there's two things. I think most people, 30 days is really not that long, and like if you're a vegetarian because you think meat is disgusting, it's an awful, cruel practice. You've got to go into it with the mindset that, I think like any program you adopt, you have to psychologically buy into it ahead of time or it's doomed to fail, And so I think it requires most vegetarians to realize that their health is failing. Once they start to honestly say, hey, my energy sucks. I've got anemia. My digestive health is not good. My skin is dry. I'm tired. I'm depressed. Whatever it is, once you critically and honestly take that look, then you can psychologically say, okay, I'm ready to try something else. But if you're a vegetarian or vegan, and especially if you're early on and you feel pretty good because you stop eating junk food and processed food and you're eating, fresher foods and you feel good, there's no way you're ever going to change. You're not going to convert until your health has, somewhat been compromised. I just think that's what most people, and that's why most of the people that are vegetarians, especially vegans, tend to be younger. They're 20s, maybe early 30s. They have a lot of physiologic reserve, because you built this up, and then you can slowly do that for maybe many years, and then you start noticing, you can read all about these ex-vegetarians and the things they notice, but those things take a while to come on. And then once you start noticing those things, then you're probably open to say, hey, I'm going to listen to my body, and I don't care what the hype is. I don't care what the propaganda is. I don't care about, I have to put my own health in front of the health of a snail or some other animal I'm refusing to eat.
Mm. The problem is that you'll get people on the other side who will say exactly the same thing. Oh, I went vegetarian or I went vegan and my life changed and I feel so much better, Yeah,
absolutely do. I don't discount that at all. It's clear there's examples of that. And I think most of those people are younger. Mm. There's a really sort of compassion bias, I would call it, because they just feel better that they're doing the right thing. With any diet, if you get off, sugars and processed food, that you feel better. And so that can make you feel good for about, maybe a few months, 6 months. And, you start to feel better and you start to maybe exercise. And so all these things sort of come together. and then you feel good about what you're doing for the planet, you feel good what you're doing about animals. And so that can carry people along for many, many years. And a lot of them, again, depending on what their reserve was, that's why it's so appealing to young people. You don't see as many people that are older getting those results. And, unless they're really, really sick, and then those people will initially, feel better. But as far as, once they get past those first few months, it's, the older folks, they kind of diminish in what they see as far as benefits go on, because they just don't have this physiologic reserve that a 20-year-old would.
Cool. Let's talk about some of your athletic achievements. We spoke before about obviously the world records you were breaking in rowing. We spoke got quite a lot of detail regarding your training protocol. What are you focused on at the moment from a training perspective? What have you switched to a new activity, or are you still rowing? Like, what are you focused on?
I'm still doing some rowing. I mean, it's I still want to improve upon what I've done. Training is still good. I mean, it's a lot of, I can't say I have another sport in mind right now. Like I said, I probably got another year or two of rowing in me before I'll probably switch out to something else. I'm like I said, I kind of miss throwing, so I may go back to that in the coming years. It's maybe I'll take up some sprinting, because I'm still quite fast, and so we'll just have to see. But right now, yeah, still doing the rowing. I'm experimenting a little bit, but not too much. My training has really been, pretty. I think it's pretty effective. It's been pretty stable for the last 3 or 4 years, and so I'm still kind of just pressing on with that. But I'm getting better. I'm still getting faster on the rowing machine. Just 2 days ago, I hit another PR on a certain distance, and I'm just kind of continuing to progress. I'm getting to where I'm, like I said, I was breaking the age group world records. I'm getting to where I'm, approaching the overall world records of any age, and
really?
Some of these events. So I'd like to continue to pushing myself to see how close I can get and beat the guys that are the best in the world of any age. Like I said, right now I'm already, I can beat Olympic rowers and Olympic medalists in 500-meter rows and stuff like that. So that's already pretty high level. But there's a couple guys, like there's some world's strongest man competitors that are right up there with me, and so that's like I said, I'm a little guy compared to those guys. I'm only 240 pounds. You got guys like Eddie Hall, I think, just did some of this stuff, and Brian Shawn. So I'm not far from those guys. So it's pretty good, it's pretty encouraging, even though I'm relatively small.
Yeah, all right then. How long have you been doing zero carb now? Is it 10 months?
I am a year.
Yeah.
December's a year. I started last December, so I'm right at a year.
What have you seen? I'm just wondering, since we last spoke, any more improvements in terms of overall body composition and muscle mass, anything like that? Or
like I said, I think again, I've seen improvements in some skin stuff. I mean, that's been probably the biggest improvement. My capacity to eat more has gone up. As far as one meal, I find that I'm just getting a little bit stronger, and I'm staying lean. I'm not trying to be super lean. I put up photos of me once in a while, and most people argue I'm relatively pretty darn lean for especially a 50-year-old guy. But I just continue to get incrementally better and better, a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, and despite getting older. So that's pretty cool. I don't know at what point I'll max it out. Like I said, at some point I expect that I will sort of hit my peak, and then I'll probably, hopefully very, very slowly decline when I think what I've done is I've hijacked aging a little bit, and I'm kind of building myself up back to the maximum that I can be. And then whenever I get there, and maybe I'm hoping it's a long time from now, but say it's 2 or 3 years from now, then maybe I'll notice a very slow decline in performance. But at this point, I'm still on the upswing, which is really cool.
Well, how far away are you away? Pick an event, but how far away are you away from? Where are you closest to the actual world record for, say, a said event? Like,
yeah. So, like I said, if say like for rowing, so the 1 minute world record for rowing was just set by a guy named Ross Love a few months ago. For 1 minute, it's 400, and I think he did 428 meters.
Yeah.
And I've done 415, and I probably am good for about close to 420 right now. So, it's not even it's like, what would that be? 80 meters, 1 or 2% away, as far as my performance from as a 50, soon to be 51-year-old versus the open world record. And so I'm not much off that. And so that's probably one that I probably have maybe a chance in doing. We'll see. I mean, honestly, the problem with this is most of these guys that are ahead of me outweigh me by about 30 or 40 pounds. And so I'm even though I'm a big, strong guy, these guys are bigger and stronger, And then the other thing is, and I'm not to point anybody in particular, but there's no drug testing in this sport. And so certainly this can attract that. And so that's a disadvantage because I don't do drugs or take drugs or do hormones and stuff like that. And so, but anyway, it is what it is. I've competed against guys who've used drugs all my life. And, I just accept that, hey, if that's what they want to do, that's fine. I'm not going to do that, though. And so I just have to train harder.
Last time we spoke, you were talking about your training age and how you keep meticulous records of your training. And you were saying last time that your training age, so in terms of your performance, was the same as when you were 42. Has it fallen since? I'm assuming it probably has since we last spoke.
I would say that because that was in reference to things like deadlifting and stuff like that. So I haven't focused on that lately. So I can't say right now. I can say that my overall performance, particularly on the rowing machine, has improved. And so then I would say, yeah, probably. I think one of the things is I haven't gained any weight. And so my strength to weight ratio continues to improve. So, I would put myself up against any 20-year-old in the gym on a rowing machine and probably decimate 99.999% of them over sprint distances in anybody in the world. So, but yeah, I think that, I sort of, without trying to sound, crazy, but I think I've generally reversed the clock when it comes to my own particular athletic performance.
Yeah. Do you reckon, I'm thinking, obviously, conversation happens quite a lot on this podcast is around optimizing gains and muscle development. And I'm thinking about what you said before about how, when you eat a steak, it's animal material. It's the easiest thing that our body can use to then produce muscle mass on our body effectively. It's the kind of path of least resistance. I'm just thinking, do you think, if you're having a conversation with someone who was looking for that outcome in terms of optimizing muscular development, do you think a zero-carb diet is optimal? Because I think it might be, just based on my own experience. And
yeah, I don't. It becomes a difficult situation because one of the, obviously when we're talking about, if you're talking strictly about bodybuilding, and a lot of people use those guys as an example, obviously there's a lot of drug use in bodybuilding. There is, an effective insulin has, it's particularly in association with carbohydrates. So it's not the carbohydrates themselves per se that are allowing muscle growth. Some people will say that there's a fuel source that allows you to train, and I'll say that I can train just as well as pretty much anyone else without the carbohydrates. But I think the insulin effect that carbohydrates provides is important, and I think it's important for muscle growth. That's why a lot of bodybuilders will inject insulin for the very same reasons. And so, but I do think what we notice is that if you eat meat in particular, there is an insulin response, and then if you eat high doses of meat, you're going to develop some of that insulin response. So I think it's an effective strategy, and it can be, but I think you'd have to eat quite a bit. You have to really, you're into the 3, 4, 5, 6 pounds of meat. If your goal is, maximum muscle mass and bodybuilding type stuff. Now, again, whether you take drugs or not, stuff like that is sort of beside the point. So
yeah, I guess I'm talking about natural natural progression.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Again, I mean, it probably is a very good system, and again, I'm not opposed. Maybe, there may be times where, you eat 99% or 95% of your diet is meat, and then you add a little bit of carbohydrate at some point that might make it better. As long as that carbohydrate source doesn't cause negative issues for you, that may be more optimal. I'm not sure. I know for me, from a performance standpoint, it didn't help. And for me, it caused some negative health issues that I just didn't want to experience. And so I'm not comfortable saying that it's the most optimal way to guarantee that, but I think it could be. And I think there's people that are testing it out. In fact, I'm getting some guys that are professional athletes that are contacting me that are doing this stuff. And, that are starting to experiment, and the early results so far seem to be pretty positive from a performance standpoint. We'll see what happens long term, and see how these guys do with adaptation. I know for me, it took me several months to adapt, and so we'll see if like I said, if there's somebody out there that's in their off season and are willing to give it a couple months to adapt and see how things are doing, I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, like I could be biased, but I am biased, as we've already discussed. But I just this is going to sound so arrogant, but I just looked at myself in the mirror this morning. I was like, I've definitely, I'm not, it's not like I've been actively trying that hard to get into really good shape. And just by eating this way and, as each day passes, I probably get more and more carnivorous and less, there less veggies and carbs will appear on my plate. My body composition is just brilliant, I mean, I did a 3-point caliper test the other day, and I know that's not perfectly accurate, but I recorded about 8.1%. And, I feel good. So it's very interesting to me. And, I'm definitely going to be doing some more sort of N=1. I may join the was it Carnivore month in January?
Yeah, World Carnivore month in January. Yeah.
Yeah, I may join that. Although I'd have to deviate because I think there's a few things going on in January, which that's my own issue. Anyway, so the last thing I wanted to just talk about briefly, Shawn, is your Carnivore training system. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that and explain to the listeners what that's about?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, as I get more and more attention, I'm getting a lot of people that are just asking me, this and this question, that question, this question, and there's a lot of people that that I think from a health standpoint, I think if you get a diet down that's pretty reasonable, and then and there's other lifestyle issues that I go into there, things about sleep and cold showers and all this other stuff. We talk about that, but then a good solid training system. And I think we can debate the merits of different types of training system, but what has worked well for me and what I think is very safe, and I think that's the main thing, because I think there's a lot of people that needlessly get injured, and it's also very effective and efficient. And there's a lot of things out there that I see that are kind of waste of time. I mean, I look at people doing exercise in gym. I'm like, you're basically wasting time, or you're not using the best tool for the job. And so this is designed to put the best tool for the job in people's hands. It's in the most efficient way, in a very safe way, and it's also designed to help people transition over to a carnivorous diet. Like I said, it's my take on that. It's been my experience, what I've learned. I walk people through, and then I can give people direct feedback, through these Facebook Live sessions where I can actually spend 15 minutes answering somebody's question rather than trying to do it on a tweet. And so it's just a way for me to hopefully get people healthier, help change their lives, which is ultimately what I want to do. It's what ultimately brings me joy in the world, is being able to positively impact people's health. And so that's why, I set this up. It's actually funny. There's another guy in Ireland named Garvin Smith who contacted me. So another one of you Irish guys that helped me set this program up. And so he's had some experience with some other people, but he seemed to think that my message would resonate with some people. And so we're starting this, and we've gotten quite a few people already signing up, and more people signing up every day. And, it's just a real exciting thing for me. Obviously I can make a little bit of revenue. It's not like I'm not charging all that much money. It's actually pretty cheap, but it's just a way for me to, because this is it takes some time. It takes some time and effort and work. And, you can't do everything, completely for free. Although I've done tons of this free stuff over the last couple of years, and hopefully changes people's lives. But it's just, like I said, it's just something I really enjoy. It's evolving, and the more feedback I get, the more people I interact with, the more I can hopefully make it better, and then hopefully we can certainly impact people's lives and just get them healthier and turn them into just really strong, healthy carnivores.
Nice. I was really impressed with your webpage, by the way.
Well, you can thank Garvin because he set that up. My web skills are, I think I've got some skills in some things, but web skills are not one of them. And I'm learning as I go, as you notice by some of the technical issues we even had today. I'm still trying to figure this stuff out, which is, it can be challenging sometimes. And
that's carnivoretrainingsystem.com, isn't it?
Carnivoretrainingsystem.com. Yeah, like I said, you can sign up at any time. It's designed as a 12 weeks program to get people started, and then there's more advanced things I can do later on down the road. But it's just a basic way to incorporate kind of what my style of training is, what's been effective for me, what's kept me injury free for, I've been training for 40 years without an injury basically. And I think diet plays a big role in that, but I think also just doing stuff that's not going to get you hurt and doing it in a smart way. But at the same time, you have to be able to figure out how to ramp up the intensity, make it effective, but at the same time, make it minimally risky.
Cool. And Shawn, what's the best way for people to find out more about you, obviously, in addition to that?
Yeah, so my Instagram, which is suddenly getting quite popular, Shawn Baker 1967.
I wonder why that is.
Well, I think I'm sure Joe Rogan effect on there, but
yeah.
And then my Twitter obviously is sbakermd. The Carnivore Training System.com is another way. I'm going to soon, I think my Facebook page is just Shawn Baker. I'll probably start interacting more with that once I figure out how to do that, because I'm getting a lot of people want to sort of friend or follow me on Facebook, so I'll probably open that stuff up. Then n=many.com is, I get a lot of, I communicate through quite a few people on that side as well. And then again, of course, carnivoretrainingsystem.com would ways to get a hold of me. So there you go.
Cool. No, that's cool. I'll put that all in the blog post. Do you know what? This might be interesting to you. I think it was either the day of or the day after your episode on Joe Rogan. I had 1,000 hits just on your episodes on my podcast, just on those 2 web pages, in that one day. And that's because I wasn't even number 1 on Google. I thought I was like number 4 or 5 for your name, Shawn Baker MD or something like that. But that was pretty cool, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's good for you, Lawrence. I hope it drives some traffic to your stuff, because I know you're going to do some good work out there too. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I've got some interesting stuff coming up. Approached by a lot of people about participating in projects and different movies and
no way. Like documentaries and stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple documentaries that I've been asked to participate in, and so it's pretty exciting stuff. It's fun for me, and hopefully, like I said, ultimately, if I can impact more people's health in a positive manner, I'll be a happy man.
Is there a kind of a carnivore documentary on the horizon then? I see.
Sort of, yeah.
It's a top secret.
It's not. I'll talk about it more once I'll probably help talk about it, promote it as we get out. But yeah, there's some stuff. It's kind of, there's going to be some stuff coming out. There's going to be a rebuttal to what the hell the vegan stuff is.
Oh, that was awful.
There's going to be stuff from the other point of view, and I think I'll be included in some of that stuff. And I think there's a couple of movies that are out there. A couple of filmmakers have approached me to participate in some of these films. So I'm happy to do that. So it'll be fun.
Cool. And for everyone listening, for the blog post for this episode and all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.org. And until next time, guys, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Before you head off, head on over to corpwarrior.com. That's CORP warrior.com. To get your free high-intensity training Google Progress chart, an ebook with 6 interview transcripts of some of my top guests, including Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, and Bill Day Simone, on how to optimize muscle gain, fat loss, and overall health in an efficient, effective, and sustainable way. These transcripts are deliberately not verbatim. Instead, they've been transcribed in an easy read format to make it more enjoyable and easier for you to quickly pick out what you need and start getting results. To get your ebook, head on over to corpwarrior.com, enter your email address, then check your email for an email from me with a confirmation link. Once you click the link, you will be instantly redirected to a PDF version of the transcripts. This podcast is brought to you by HitUni.com. HitUni.com are a provider of amazing online courses for high-intensity training qualifications. HitUni comes highly recommended by the best in the field, including Body by Science co-author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, and trainer and founder of Bay.com, Drew Bay. It was founded by my friend, author, and longtime personal trainer Simon Shawcross, who's also been a guest on the podcast. Simon has 15 years experience training clients and has supervised over 15,000 high-intensity training workouts. Using knowledge from experts like Skylar Tanner, Dr. James Steele, Dr. Ellington Darden, HitUni is a goldmine for learning everything to do with high-intensity training. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace. There's online support and a discussion forum where you can share ideas and ask for help. To learn more about high-intensity training and improve my own results, I started their personal trainer course. The content is amazing, the courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. I should also mention there is a DIY course, so this is the course for you if you're not necessarily a personal trainer, but you want to learn more about high-intensity training and how to implement it for maximum benefit in your own exercise regime. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, pick your course, and enter the coupon code CW10 for 10% discount. Thank you for your support.